He's Howard Eibach, a former copywriter and creative director and the author of 2 books on the creative brief.
And he's Henry Gomez, advertising agency strategist with 25 years of experience. Together, we're the Brief Brothers, having an ongoing conversation about creative briefs, briefing, and advertising. We're back, Henry. Today, I thought we would revisit a topic we started on a couple of episodes ago by revisiting a blog post by a planner from BBH in London, Chaz Wigley. He had 100, what we call them, points of advice that he's assembled over his vast career. We did an episode where each of us took 3 or 4 of his points and talked about them. And we left a lot on the table. And I think we're going to be coming back more than once. So let's go back. Let's go back to his huge list and start again. I'm going to start with number 35, which reads, think unprofessionally when you look at creative work. You are no longer an ad exec. You are just someone walking down the street or thumbing through a feed. You don't care. What will stop you? That's great advice, because we have this inordinate tendency, whether you're a creative or an account person, to just be in our bubble, be in our cubicles, and we can't get out of it. And we think and breathe and eat and live like marketers or advertising creatives or planners or product people. We've got to break out of that. Absolutely essential to think like a customer, think like a consumer. What do you think about that one?
I agree. However, this is one of those challenging ones, right? I mean, it's hard to separate yourself from being the strategist or the creative that's trying to sell an idea to a client. So it's hard not to have that looking at it through the client's eyes, first of all, and trying to figure out like what, if any, objections the client is going to raise, which I think is a valuable part of what a strategist brings to the table as well. I think the point is you need to evaluate creative wearing multiple hats, not just the consumer hat. Because if you just wear the consumer hat, you're probably going to have challenges selling it if you don't have an ability to think ahead of what an objection might be from the client.
I think there's a couple of levels to this as well. I mean, if you were my partner in the creative in a creative team, if you were the art director, I'm the copywriter. When we come up with an idea, I'm going to be the last person to be able to look at it objectively because I had the idea. But you as my partner are going to be what I always call my BS detector. You're going to do this, you're going to do that, or you're going to say, okay, well, there's maybe something there, but let's explore it more. Okay, that's one level. We take it to the creative director when we're selling our ideas. What you just said, I think, applies full force. Once the creative director picks an idea, and if one of ours wins, then we're going to let him or her do the presenting. We'll rehearse and practice it with him. The best time for us to be that objective or consumer-like personage in the whole process is probably at the very beginning for me as a creative. Yeah. Okay, you got one for us. Lay it on us.
Yeah. So this one is I really like this one. It says, as much as you know what the brand stands for, know what it stands against. And then I'm coupling that one, that's number 82, with number 85, which is the what they do, how they do it, and why they do it of your client's brand. If they don't know it, help them work it out. See Simon Sinek. So I like this one because it talks to really figuring out what a brand is about. And I think the first one that I read, which is about finding an enemy, is often a helpful tool when we're looking at a brand and say, well, if we stand for this, what do we stand against? And that's usually a really good way to kind of bring what you stand for and contrast to what it stands against. I also brought up the thing about the mention of Simon Sinek because he famously had a TED Talk in which he talks about the why of companies or their purpose. And he says that too many companies get lost in the what they do, but they don't talk about the why they do it. I think Simon, with all due respect to Simon Sinek, I think he's been overblown a little bit. I think all three of those things are important. As Chaz Wigley points out here, he says the what they do, the how they do it, and the why they do it. I think they're all equally important. They're parts of a three-legged stool. I think it's a mistake to see the why as the ultimate arbiter of what a brand is about. Because certainly there's points of distinctiveness and differentiation in the what you do and the how you do it. And I think consumers don't parse things the way we think they parse them.
Well, I couldn't agree more with that last part of your statement. That's we give them credit for caring more about brands than they ever do. Not that they don't care, it's just it's not part of their world, it's our world. Yeah. Now, going back to your points, I added a segment to my training on writing a creative brief called it's one of those things that I would call an option. If you want to add it to your brief, go right ahead. I didn't think it was absolutely required, but it is. What is your brand's enemy? And I found a chart where someone else had actually thought about this. Actually, I stole the idea. Amateurs plagiarize, professionals steal, right? But I think it's good thinking. It's just another way to think about your brand. A second way of addressing that same point is to ask the question, who is not our customer? And why are they not our customer? Why have they chosen not to partake of the brand or use the brand or use the service? Is it because they tried it and didn't like it, or they simply just don't know about it yet, or are they sitting on the fence, or they're skeptical? See, these are good questions to ask as you're writing the brief and as you're addressing solving the problem creatively. So we're in agreement there.
Cool.
All right.
What's your next one?
My next one is number 39. I'm going back to the screen so I can read it correctly, because I don't want to misquote Chaz, our buddy Chaz, who's got some great wisdom here. 39 says, strategy should be simple. Don't pretend otherwise. Yes, your mother should get it. In the seconds we have to work with, we don't have any choice. You know, this goes back to something I've believed a long time. I use the term KISS a lot. Everybody knows what KISS stands for. I've adapted it slightly. It stands for Keep It Simple Students, because this is a family podcast, right? Simplicity will never be our enemy. We always need to strive to be simple. We have this remarkable capacity. Maybe I should amend that and say marketers have this amazing capacity to take a simple idea and complicate the hell out of it, right? They're trying to overthink things. We all have a tendency to overthink things, so simplicity is key. As a strategist, what would you say there, Henry?
I agree. I think that that's why we advocate constantly for a brief to be short, because when it's short, it's simple. When you start just layering things in there, it becomes complicated. What you really are asking them to consider becomes obscured in too much fluff and complication. So, of course, I've mentioned a couple of times, you know, it took me many, many years to realize the power of editing yourself.
Right.
And I'm amazed when I go through and what really taught me the power was writing cases for award submissions where you have word limitations, right? So they tell you 200 word executive summary and you start writing and your first draft has 500 words and you're like, holy crap, how am I going to get all that into 200 words? And then you realize, well, this sentence, I'm just repeating what I said over here. And this 8-word sentence could be a 4-word sentence. And so it just, you know, not just at a strategy level, but even at an execution level, the words you choose can be much simpler. So I agree.
I experienced something similar to that when I was working with my art director partner at Team One in El Segundo many years ago. I was required to do something called copy fitting. And I don't know why it happened in this particular setting, but we would write a print ad or some other space ad, and we'd come up with a concept, and then she'd do a beautiful layout. We'd collaborate on the layout, and then she'd say, "Okay, I've got room for 50 words." I said, "Well, I've got 400." That was my requirement to take a 400 word message and make it fit in 50 words. I'm exaggerating a little bit, but not much. And it was a great exercise to be able to say exactly what I wanted to say, to sell as hard as I could in a quarter or a third of the words. So simplicity has to be the guideline.
I think it's a good, Microsoft Word at the bottom, it'll give you a word count.
Yep.
And whatever you're writing, whatever document you're writing, write it out, first draft, and look at how many words you have. And then make it a point to see if you can half that.
Yep.
Because I bet you most times you can half it.
Yeah. Okay, you're up, Henry. What do you got?
Okay, so my next one is you need to sell both now and in the future. This is retail versus brand. Getting the balance right is important. See Binet and Field. And of course, he's referring to Les Binet and Peter Field out of the United Kingdom, who've done a lot of work, including a paper that they published that you can get from the IPA called The Long and the Short of It. And that's basically the point is there's long run advertising and short run advertising. The retail, what they call activation, which gets people to go buy now. You might have it on sale. You might be having an event, a promotion. And then there's the long term, like building up the brand and why the brand is great. And the mistake that a lot of marketers have made in recent years is because of the advent of digital marketing and performance-based marketing is that focus on just the retail activation part. But the more you do price promotion, the more you do retail activation, the more you devalue the brand over time. So having that balance of brand building along with short-term retail activation is really important in getting that balance right. And Binet and Field have done a lot of research in different categories that balance is a little bit different. It's ranges between a 60-40 in one direction and a 60-40 in the other direction. So depending on the category, how competitive it is, how seasonal it is, and so forth, there are factors. But for sure, I think one of the things that we've learned at least to articulate more recently is your brand. If we're let's talk about it in terms that we kind of now know in the pandemic, right? Like your brand, the strength of your brand is what creates your long-term kind of immunity, right? It's what builds up your defenses. And then the retail activation is like your adrenaline that helps you do whatever it is you need to do right now. And to be healthy, you need to have both systems kind of working right. You can't just live on one and not the other.
I see this from a kind of a boots on the ground situation, having spent a good chunk of my career in direct marketing. That's another way to distinguish. Direct marketer is trying to sell right now, whereas a brand is trying to sell now, tomorrow, next month, a year from now. In fact, I read and I've heard it argued that those of us in the field of advertising, separate from direct marketing, are not really in the business of selling. We're in the business of making people remember, getting into their head so that they remember what we're trying to say. And the retailers are the ones who actually do the selling. So that's a good point.
If you pause brand advertising for a year, probably you're not going to see a huge slip in sales. By year 2, that slip in sales is going to be noticeable. And by year 3, you're going to be going off a cliff. I think people will easily forget your brand if you don't, as Paul Feldwick says in his books, keep your name before the public, right? That I think is important, and that is a purpose of advertising. Doing it well, having good brand advertising obviously has a multiplicative effect on how
easy for you to say, huh?
Effective that keeping your name before the public is. So
right. Okay, my turn. And we got to say thank you to Chaz for some of these great, very simply stated pieces of wisdom. This is number 43. I'm going to get it right here. He says, when you are young, you are good at the zeitgeist and poor at the big picture. When you are old, it's the other way around. Make the most of what you have at each stage. I think this is an interesting synopsis of the whole ageism thing in our industry. What I think advertisers and agencies want really is that zeitgeist. what's right now, what's in the moment, what can the young person grab hold of from popular culture or what's out in the world and make it relevant or connected to the brands that we sell. And yet when we get to our age, or my age anyway, I'm not as in touch with exactly everything that's right here, right now, in terms of technology, in terms of ideas, in terms of music and areas and things like that. But I can stand back and say, all right, I can see what's going on and I can see a trajectory. And that's going to help me share ideas, share learning. I think that the same applies to how we address the brands in the marketplace. I love this thought.
Yeah, I do too. I think it brings out really the reality is that neither is the full picture.
Right.
As a strategist, when you're young, as he says, you're going to be a lot more in touch with pop culture, the trends, what's the latest thing, and not the big picture. So you need, I think you can maximize that, but at the same time, you need to be aware of the fact that you don't see the big picture and look for mentorship in that regard. And when you're older, like me, an old fart, I might, one, I have to, I'm not going to be as in touch with the zeitgeist, but I should force myself to try to be, as the young person should try to force themselves to see the big picture. But I should also seek out and partner with younger people who are in touch with the zeitgeist. So I think both sides are really important. I think you're right, though. Our industry has tended to err on the side of the zeitgeist. One, because our industry loves sizzle,
Mm.
and two, because young people are cheaper. And who would have thunk that there would be a bias toward cheaper?
Right. Exactly. Okay. Go ahead. You get one more? I think we each have one more.
Yeah. So I have this one, which is number 92. Coke got it right. The ideal brand is both top of mind and physically easily available. Make things well known, and easy to buy. See Byron Sharp. And I'm coupling that one with 93, which is the real battle is in reach and penetration, not loyalty and frequency. See Sharp again. And so, of course, I chose these two because they mention Byron Sharp, my hero, one of my heroes, and the great advances that we're making in marketing science, regarding how brands really grow in the real world empirically. And those is, first you have to have maximize mental availability, right? Like if you're the brand that occupies the most mental space in your target audience's mind, you're going to draw the benefit of being that mental space. But two, physical availability, right? If people know your brand, but they can't access it because of some messed up distribution model, or you're only direct to consumer and you're not in retail stores. That, which is why you see direct to consumer brands opening retail stores, and you see retailers going direct to consumer.
Right.
It's all about maximizing physical availability. So that for sure, I don't think there should be any dispute. And then the other is, it's all a penetration game. A company spend billions of dollars on loyalty programs and things like that, and all the empirical evidence says you get more mileage bringing a new customer into the fold than trying to ring an additional purchase. I mean, how many more sticks of deodorant are you going to buy in a year? It's really hard in most categories to squeeze out more usage out of a consumer.
I was just thinking about the amount of space that's dedicated in a Target store to Tide detergent. You walk down the aisle to laundry, and Tide basically owns 1,000 aisles. I'm exaggerating, but
Don't stop there. P&G, right. It's a P&G.
right.
So you walk down, you pretty quickly realize that there's, in packaged goods, there's two major players, Unilever and Procter and Gamble, and they're on every shelf of those packaged goods.
Yeah, and that's what this is all about. And then that brings me, it's a slight tangent to what we're talking about, but I get this in the training that I do. I hear a lot of people saying, well, what's the point of differentiation? What's the point of differentiation? And I think, what is the difference between Tide and Gain? And you know what? I can't think of any other brands besides Tide and Gain. I'm sure there are more out there, but I can't think of them. It's Tide which, I can't pull back wide enough. And then there's gain. And what's the difference between them? I have no idea. But what's the brand message? What is the idea or the feeling or the sensation that you get when you see that orangish red container? It's like, oh, I'm at home, I'm safe. I don't know which one I'm going to take because there are 12,000 of them, but I'll find one. And then there's like that much space for gain. This is what we're talking about here. So it's not about differentiation.
They're
it's
both,
about.
I think they're both P&G brands. And
Are they
I have
really?
a colleague here at Zuby that worked on gain, and he could bore you to tears on how they were positioned differently. But yeah, they fulfill different portfolio missions within the constellation of brands that
Sure,
P&G
sure.
has.
But what you do is you end up pointing out or relying on what's distinctive about the brand, not a differentiation. And you remember the color of the shape of the container.
Yep.
Tide is orangish red and Gain is green.
Yep.
And
And
beyond that,
we've talked about that, like with the whole Tropicana rebranding and
yep.
how they basically lost a ton of consumers because they completely changed the packaging to something that you could arguably say was more modern, aesthetically pleasing, but it wasn't what people were accustomed to. They
Right.
didn't have any mental availability for the new packaging, and it was so disastrous that they had to switch back within a few months because their sales went off a cliff. So that's a lesson to learn from a pretty important marketer.
And I think that leads nicely into my last piece of wisdom from Chaz, and that is number 44 on his list. And again, we'll include the URL for this blog post so that you can go look at it again, which reads very simply, very very quickly. Remember that most of the world doesn't think like you. And this whole, just the episode with the changing of the packaging for Tropicana is one of many, many examples. We have to come to the whole process of speaking to and empathizing with customers and consumers with humility. And I'm afraid that is to a larger and larger extent today amongst our colleagues in our industry, we're less and less capable of doing that. And it's kind of frightening.
Yeah, I agree. And in fact, the one that I chose for my last one, I think is a corollary to that one, which is number 77. Don't ever look down at your target audience. It doesn't help you in your job, and they have their reasons for their worldview just as much as you do for yours. And I think that it really speaks to, I hate to say it, the arrogance that a lot of us in the industry have, that we as an industry have. And you and I have been talking a little bit offline about can't sell, won't sell. I think it delves into this subject matter, which is important for us to face as an industry. And it's interesting that the book, he talks about we, even though you kind of get the impression that he doesn't think that way, the author doesn't think that way. But we as an industry do suffer from a little bit of this. Look at those Trump voters or those Brexit voters or those NRA members or those whatever, because we live on the coasts in these, urban metropolises that have a very distinct sensibility that's very different than a lot of other Americans or a lot of other people around the world.
Yep.
And it's not to say one side is right or one side is wrong, but those people buy laundry detergent too, right?
Right.
And so understanding that they have a different viewpoint and not judging that viewpoint. Like, you have to empathize. It's the opposite. You have to empathize with a target and say, you know what? I might not like what these people believe or stand for, but I have to understand that they have their motivations and their reasons. And I'm not going to change that with this advertising for this laundry detergent.
Right.
What I need to do is work with what I have and make a message that's appealing broadly to as many people as possible. That is, of course, unless you're narrowly campaigning for a political figure or an initiative or something like that. It's a different story. But we're talking about big brands, big, consumer goods. And so I think really that humility. There's a great piece, and I wish I could find it. There was a great piece from a creative director. She gave a speech in Chicago. I believe she was a Chicago creative director. And she talked about this very phenomenon. and to me, it was about having that empathy for the target audience.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's vitally important, and I think maybe we should delve into this a little bit further. Maybe we'll invite the author of Can't Sell Won't Sell, whose name escapes me just at the
Yeah,
moment.
I don't have the book with me right now. I'll flash it up on the screen.
Yeah. I think it's an important topic because, to your point, and you've mentioned this many times before, when we write a brief and we answer the question, who are we talking to? We as a creatives, I take that information and I use it as a costume. I love that analogy that you drew. It's like putting on the costume, wearing it, and seeing the world through the eyes of this customer for at least a few minutes to get a sense of, all right, what's her world like? I need to talk to her. You
and
can't
doing
do that if you're not empathizing with her.
and doing it in good faith,
Yes.
with
Yeah.
with not the idea of mocking, or do it in
No.
good faith and say,
Yeah.
you know what, I'm not going to assume that this person is evil because they live in the Midwest and have a conservative value, or vice versa. If you happen to be a conservative, I'm not going to assume that this target audience in New York is evil because they're very progressive and they are cosmopolitan or whatever. So I think it's important.
Last time I checked, all the agencies are still selling products that need to have customers go use their wallets and spend the money, and that's what pays the bills. Everybody likes to do PSAs. I love to do PSAs for causes that matter to me, but that's not what pays the bills. Not at all.
Agreed. And I think you're right. We need to have a more in-depth conversation about this.
All right, Henry, good stuff.
Good stuff, Howard. So we're back with another creative review, and this time we're going to look at a 60-second film from Adam and Eve DDB. The brand being advertised is Avanti West Coast, which is a train company in a rail company in the United Kingdom. Let's take a look. Okay, so 60-second film. What do you think, Howard?
This was just charming. I really was taken by the roller skating tortoise or turtle. It reminded me of my much younger days when I was an avid rollerblader. The music really grabbed me, and when we did a little research, it is, I think it's a 70s disco from an Arabic musician. So it's just an interesting mix of the icon to represent the traveler, a roller skating tortoise with interesting music. The visuals were just fun. And it to me, it's a way of conveying without any words at all. It's all visual, no copy until the very end, no voiceover. It tells a great story about getting from point A to point B in a fun, relaxing way. And we were talking before we hit the record button, and I was musing, why did they pick a turtle? It's like, well, it actually works pretty well, I think, because without the rollerblades or without the train, this creature would have a hard time getting around. Well, we know, Americans are well aware that in the United Kingdom and in Europe, train travel is a lot more popular and it's easier to do than it is here in the United States. So for the Europeans and for the Brits, this is not unfamiliar territory, but I think they're going to be highly entertained And they are expecting, from my perspective as a creative, they expect to be entertained in their advertising. Their agencies and their brands, I think, have worked a lot harder in training the British public to expect good, entertaining advertising than we have over here. So this is, I think, fitting with what the kind of brilliant creative that the agency world does over there. And this is, from Adam and Eve DDB. It's a good shop, legacy shop. What do you think, Henry?
Yeah, specifically Adam and Eve DDB, one of the foremost UK based advertising agencies, creative powerhouse. I thought, first of all, the production values were amazing, incredible. The music also got my attention. I didn't realize it was like an 80s disco thing, although it makes sense to me because when I think of like roller skating, there's certain kind of songs from that era that are the ones that I would associate with roller skating. So that makes sense. Who doesn't like turtles? Turtles are cute, and I think that's another reason to choose the turtle. But certainly, the idea that without the tool, which in this case is skates or the train, we'd be much slower, right? Than we are with it. It's just a clever, the turtle goes under the cars, it goes through the tunnel, and so kind of giving you a little bit of of there was that part of the metaphor too that was really close to the real life, right? Like the cars in gridlock and the turtle is cruising under them. Another reason to choose a turtle, right? Low to the ground, could go under the vehicle. So all in all, it is, I think, a charming spot, entertaining, keeps the brand before the name before the public, and speaks to the benefit of the category, but in a way that I don't know enough about Avanti West Coast advertising to know if this is very distinctive brand tone for them, or if this is the start of something new for them that they hope to keep on pursuing. But I doubt that other rail providers in the UK are doing similar things. So all in all, I think a very nice spot, a 60-second spot. I could see a 30 working just as well.
Yeah.
But this 60 as a kind of like a launch is a nice touch.
I give it 5 out of 5 turtles.
How many lettuce leaves?
Good stuff, Henry.
Good stuff, Howard.
He's Henry Gomez.
And he's Howard Eibach, and together we're the Brief Brothers. Till next time, bye-bye.
Bye.